When I think about the 95%, I don't just think about like, how do we get this thing in front of people, but like, what is something that's going to be in somebody's mind for like multiple years?
The deepest moat you could possibly have. Just being able to be remembered at the moment that you would want to be remembered without a prompting.
I've been really bullish on pre-recording pieces of the webinar. Having those pre-recording bits makes it really engaging. It gets the audience's attentions back. And so like we share it on social, those are getting views. If chunks are on YouTube, those are getting views. So everything is like a lot longer and that shelf life really improves.
Wistia is now associated with high effort, high quality content. Their product must be high effort, high quality as well. If you were advising a friend who wanted to kind of get some of these things going, what steps would you recommend them to take?
There's a couple things that I would recommend for content teams that I feel like, at least for me, I feel like I've changed my perspective on in the last few years.
Sam, thanks for joining me today. Super excited to chat. For those who don't know, I'll just give like a quick little overview of yourself and Wistia. But yeah, you're the head of content at Wistia. I'm sure many folks have heard of Wistia. A lot of the reason why they've heard of Wistia are some of the strategies we are actually going to talk about today. Content strategies, the 95% quote unquote sort of marketing strategies. But yeah, Wistia is a video marketing platform. A lot of people historically, it's been around for a long time, maybe 15, coming up on 20 years, actually, I think, getting there pretty close. And a lot of historical momentum, I think, with like the video hosting platform. But there's actually many more tools and product feature sets inside of Wistia that you all have rolled out over the years. And I know a lot of your content and marketing efforts have gone towards like getting awareness, affinity, and adoption of those as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, maybe to start, like if you could just give us from like the highest level perspective, when we look at what this show covers is obviously like what we call like 95% content. So it's content designed to get in front of future buyers who aren't necessarily searching for a solution like Wistia today. When you all think of that 5% marketing, like those who are actively like going into Google or searching review sites for, a video marketing platform versus 95% marketing, which obviously captures the entire TAM, but they're not necessarily like in buy mode. How do you look at those two different buckets just from the highest level of like marketing efforts in general, whether you want to kind of break it down by like percentage, like rough percentage focus or just philosophical? Yeah, just curious how you all think about that.
Yeah, no. So for us, like you mentioned, Wistia has been around for a while. So we have like a pretty solid, like we're well known within video hosting. But in the world of like webinars, video editing, and other pieces, or even feedback on videos, like we're just not as well known on that. So I think like any company that is a multi feature product where you have like different entry points that might appeal to different people, like you're going to ratchet up how much is that 95% versus that 5%. And so it's like maybe on content that's like hosting, like our core kind of stuff there, we're much more to bottom of the funnel stuff. We have like good awareness. We know we're on the short list. That I'd say is like almost 80% towards like bottom of the funnel decision making. And we already have a lot of that content built. When we're talking about something like webinars, we've had a webinar product for about 2.5, 3 years now, really picking up steam and improving in quality. That's going to be a lot higher on that kind of 95% journey. We want to be talking like in the webinar space, like closer to probably like 70% is in that 95% category. And so for us, like it definitely partially depends on the product. But overall, I'd say Wistia as a brand, we are just very focused. Like if I had to say like all across all product lines, we are in the like 80% of the work is on the 95%, right?
Yeah.
Like we really want to make sure we're a product-led growth company. And so it's like we really want to be top of mind for lots and lots of people. And we want to have a really strong brand affinity there. So definitely the majority for us skews that way. partially just because of like how long we've been in business, the nature of our product, and just like the nature of our sales cycle.
That makes a ton of sense, especially like in comparison to the legacy, really dominant household name, product with the hosting side, and then like trying to drive that awareness for the newer products and sort of tool sets that you all are rolling out. When it comes to that 95% sort of content strategy bucket, there's obviously a lot of levers
Hmm.
available to kind of execute on underneath that when it comes to, original series, your own webinars, newsletter, organic social. You all have guides and sort of playbooks. Maybe could you give just like a paint a picture of what that looks like for you all, big picture? I know we could probably go into each one and honestly
Hmm.
spend a lot of time like unpacking each one, but yeah, just to give that big picture overview of like what that looks like overall.
Totally. And so for us, like our main things were pretty traditional in like a lot of the areas we focus on. Blog, like having regular cadence of blog content, having a regular cadence of webinar content, guides, and reports. Right. Like, so those are pretty much, I'd say, like the big buckets, as well as social and specifically like subject matter experts. We have a subject matter expert program as well, where we're trying to get those ideas out more through individuals than through like the corporate accounts. And so like for us, like it's definitely creating that regular cadence of blog content, that regular cadence of webinars, and obviously like videos. We make, as Wistia, as a video hosting company, is video editing, we make a lot of videos. And that's like a huge driver of our direction. And so like those would probably be like the big chunks or big areas. And then each one of those we can kind of drill down. They're all sort of tied together, but each one of those is like definitely areas where we have different strategies, different things we're implementing, and different metrics we're tracking. Other thing I would just call out kind of to our overall like strategy is Wistia, especially for me, like I've been at the company for about a year and a half. And when I wanted to switch job, it was the only company I applied for. Like I really just wanted to work here at Wistia because I think one of the things that really stuck out to me about the company is how the shelf life
Mm.
of some of their assets. Like
Mm.
Wistia ran a video series called 110-100 about, and people still talk about it. And that was years ago. They ran a show Brandwagon, years old, still talk about it. And so like one of the things that really attracted to me to the company and really attracted me of like, these are people I really want to learn from. And this is an area that we could do really amazing stuff is like the shelf life. I also look very much at like, what is the shelf life of this content? Like, how long can a really good piece of content in this area last? And so, like, when I think about the 95%, I don't just think about like, how do we get this thing in front of people, but like, what is something that's going to be in somebody's mind for like multiple years potentially? Where they're going to see something and like they might not have heard of us, but like, oh, wow, I read this really great piece of content. 2 years later, they're talking about webinars with somebody. They're like, this guidebook was fucking crazy. Let's look at that company, And so it's like, I
Yes.
definitely am very keen to think about like the shelf life of content as well and how that affects that kind of like 95%.
I love that framing of it. And it's one of those things that is hard to quantify, I think, like from a measurement perspective, but like this thing I've really been just focused on lately is this concept of like memory, like just being able to be remembered at the moment that you would want to be remembered without a prompting. So, sort of unaided, like recall, essentially being like perhaps, especially now, like the deepest moat you could possibly have, And so it's like, I am very familiar with those two series that you called out as well. I can't actually tell you anymore what exactly like I remember specifically about them, but I remember years ago them coming across like my feed or something and I like checked them out and I remember thinking, wow, like this is amazing. But to your point, it's like that was years ago and I
That was
still
years
and I
ago.
still remember that. Yeah.
And it's just something that stuck, like, it got in your head in a
Yes.
way that's like, "Oh, wow, that's really incredible, like, that's amazing, they're a smart company."
Yes.
Like, and I don't know, there's so many parts of that in the work that we do that I'm like, how do we create that feeling? How do we
Yes.
create that like longevity where we stay in people's heads in that way? And I think partially for me, it's like I'm also very inspired. I used to work at HubSpot, but before I worked at HubSpot, like I learned I had no idea what I was doing in marketing, like none. I worked at a startup and I was like everything I learned was from HubSpot. And so like for me it was like I don't remember what I read. You know what I mean? Like I do not remember any of the specific articles that were like useful to me at that time. But it's like I remember HubSpot taught me marketing. And like the first company I could go to that I could buy software, I was like, HubSpot's the one I want to go to. You
Yes.
know, and it was like
Yes.
not for any specific reason, but like for like feeling and other stuff was like a
Right.
huge driver of
That
that.
trust, you had affinity with them, and maybe that was many, many months or even years later. So it's like if
Mhm.
you're just measuring that on, a short term like CAC payback, quote unquote, like period, you're not going to capture that. And this is the whole premise of 95% marketing and 95% content in general. So yeah, what of those like those buckets that you mentioned that are some of the levers that you're pulling? Maybe just like, is anything standing out to you right now that's working really well? Like between any of them, maybe whether it's the webinar, the original series. I'll just mention for everybody, like the videos you're referring to in some of this series, like you all have at least what I counted, like 11 original video series. Some of them I think are sort of like episodic ongoing, and then others of them were more like, a serialized shorter term run, but like um they've got that sort of legacy evergreen value to them that you were mentioning before. So yeah, I guess just in general overall, like anything like really standing out to you as like, oh, this is working really well right now, or like this is a really interesting unlock we've uncovered.
So I think there's like two areas that I would say, and they are not, like the most, oh, wow, this is like a really new thing, like webinars and guides, like PDF guides. And I stand by like both of those are very strong. And I think what is different for us is actually like hugely driven by process. So I'll start with guides. Like one of the things that I think Wistia does is really, really good at is we just have high like creative talent. Like we just have very good designers, videographers, and like creative folks. Like we just are a small team. Wistia is under 200 employees. Like our content teams are small, so we work really closely together. And the talent pool is just like really, really good here. So like I'll start with guides. And I
Hmm.
think like those are ones where earlier or last year, we had a big push towards webinar content. We did this very big full campaign for Webinar Wizard. And so it's like, basically we were running these ads where each ad set is related to a song. We had this Webinar Wizard song, we have a wizard character, all this other stuff. It was super fun, really great ad campaign, awesome. And then one of the problems that we were running into or seeing people having is that like webinar software people generally don't like. And the other side of it is like they don't want to switch because they're scared. And actually running a webinar itself is scary. And like no matter how many times we do it, no matter how many years we've been doing webinars, like every single time it is generally stressful to people. Like consistently.
Yep.
I do them all the time. I still get stressed. And so like we decided like, oh, what would be really good is to make like a physical guidebook, like an actual printed out physical guidebook, because a lot of the time, this was my feeling was like a lot of the time your webinar is on your computer. So the thing that you look to for reassurance can't be on the same thing that you're running the webinar on. You know what I mean?
Super
And so
smart.
it's like we built
Yep.
this whole idea. We were very inspired by Hinge.
Hmm.
Hinge did like their in real life phone book, which was really
Mm,
fun. So we
yep.
were like, oh, let's borrow some of these ideas of this like very interesting phone like book. Let's give it like a webinar theme, but make it like a guidebook. And then we'll sort of like take people on this epic journey. And so it was this great asset that performed really, really well. And I think one of the really strong things we learned about it that I'm realizing is giving us a competitive edge is we don't pass copy to design and then
Mm,
design designs it. Like that is not the way we operate, where it is more collaborative between the two. We design and we do copy simultaneously. That makes every page resonate and sing and look cool and be innovative. And it's a pain in the ass to do, but it is like a much better result for our actual content.
And that's for in the guidebook you're referring to, right?
Yeah, in the
Yeah.
guidebook I'm
Yeah.
referring to is like, and
Yep.
then we've taken this process. So instead of basically like not to stuck, but like I downloaded a guide like recently from somebody else that was like a guide to short form video. I was like, okay, great, a guide to short form video. I wanted to check it out. And it was like text, 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 text. And
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
one, like you have one of the most interesting topics you possibly could. Short form video, and I'm not seeing any pictures. Like I'm seeing
Yeah.
there's no arrows, there's no diagrams, there's no like this is not hitting. And so for me, it's like I'm realizing like we have a very competitive edge with the ability to do these guides because of the way we work together. And what it means is the guide is better, but then social PDFs that come out of it are better. The blog posts that are associated with it are better because they can leverage specific interesting diagrams we designed. And
Yes.
so like
Yes.
that process has really improved the function of our guides because they can power a lot more pieces of content than they used to. And I think that's like the webinar guidebook is a really good example of it. State of video is a good example of it. And I think we're just very cognizant of like thinking about if we're going to use this resource in other areas, how do we design it from the beginning so that it works that way?
I love this. It reminds me of, I'm not sure if you've heard of this guy Sahil Bloom. He's big on Twitter. He's got a big newsletter, sort of like personal brand in business entrepreneurship. And he just released a book. He wrote a book, released it, published it, did a big marketing blitz for it, went on a ton of podcasts. The book I think is called like 5 Levels to Wealth or something like that. But what I noticed from his strategy was throughout the book, there were a ton of like proprietary graphics and illustrations, like illustrating a concept that he was trying to say or trying to talk about in the book. And the reason he did that is because it's incredibly social, like the social ability of that to take a picture, somebody reading it, take a picture of that, then post that is so much higher than just like taking a picture of a page of text or whatever.
Yes, we saw a same thing with like actually what surprised me was in our state of video. This is a big report. It's like we do tons of research, tons of data, and we come up with all these like really great data visualizations. But this year I noticed we always get good PR coverage on it. But this year I noticed more than before, we had gotten a lot of press that were using the images.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like they would
Yes.
use specific slides, they would use specific things. And it's like now you're getting multiple layers of branding in
Yes.
there. It's like you're getting the report cited, you're getting the stat, but then all of a sudden your brand is then reinforced because they take your beautiful image and they're like, this is the best way that I could describe this stat. Like this is perfect. And so it's like even those small things, like you don't think of those, you think of those fueling social.
Right.
You don't think of those fueling PR. But
Right.
the fact that they help drive up PR and the
Yes.
person is like, oh, sick. I only have to write, I can write less now and
Yeah.
get this turned around quicker because I have all these great graphics to draw from. It's like, that's hugely valuable to us. So it's like, we've started to learn now too. It's like those images and those things are giving us a really strong edge, I feel like, in a lot of areas.
It's like content based, like word of mouth, essentially. Like in business, in my opinion, like there's pretty much no stronger acquisition channel than just word of mouth, like referral, word of mouth, like somebody saying, hey, I love Wistia. And they tell their friend, you need to sign up for Wistia. But the content based nature of that is somebody like writing about you all on social or in their outlet that they're, managing their media property or what have you. And so like arming these people that can do that at scale for you, like with content, number one, but number two, content design for them to share in this way, I think is a really powerful concept that most people don't think about. For example, I referred a company, my brother is the president of like a 300-person software company,
Mm-hmm.
and he needed something. They had a problem. I referred him a company that I was aware of. I'd never worked with them before, but they were producing a ton of great content that I followed and learned from in that category. So I told him, go check them out. And that's who he ended up using to me, that's content-based word of mouth, like, playbook to a T right there.
Yep, 100%. It's like you don't even know necessarily like I think Gong is a company that did that really, really
Yeah.
well. It's like I'm not in sales. Like I'm
Yeah.
not, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's like, but if somebody was like, I need a call recording thing, I'd be like, oh, Gong does a lot of really great research on this kind of thing. Like Gong, like like I know now from previously working at like Zoom Info, like Chorus is also good. There's a lot of other competitors, but like in terms of the call recording, it was like I knew Gog. Gog was the first one. I would have referred people to Gog just because
Yeah.
I read their content that was like seemed
Exactly.
like they can only produce this content if they have a system that works.
Yes.
Like,
Yep.
like
Yeah.
there's no way for them to have these insights and not be selling this to a lot of people that are getting value out of it.
And so how do you look at the success of something like this if we take um the guides and maybe even specifically the webinar guide or just overall that sort of pillar for you, and then we can move to webinars in general. But yeah, like, is there any quantification of success that you're looking at with that? Like, oh, because this was a physical thing you were mailing for those. So like,
Yes.
did you want to hit a certain number of that? Like you send them to like a form, put in your information, we'll mail this to you, and then you want to hit, X amount for that? Or what does success look like, for you all when you look at it?
There might be a tendency for some people to be like, the funnel is so crazy, attribution so hard. We just no, like it's the number goes up. You know what I mean? Like like I want a set number of these things. Like I want, hundreds of these to go out to people. I want hundreds of people to download the PDF. I want them to be located at companies that like I want the list of companies of people who downloaded it to be really good. So first off, like to me, that is the main thing. I want to win in that area. Like I just want to win. Like I want to get more downloads than the last guide. I want to have something that's going to continue to get downloads for a longer period of time. So like for me, it is like the initial launch data on how many people go to it, the initial data of like how many people are like consuming the content. So like click throughs on emails, like do people see the guide and want to actually get it? What are the conversion rates around like that kind of user journey? And then I think in other areas, like I'll give another guide that I think is similar, but like has a slightly different metric. We have one that is like a guide to embedding videos, right? This is less likely to be a top of funnel driver for us. But one of the things that we notice is sometimes people might embed, we are putting this in a workflow where it's like, are people taking the action after clicking the thing that we want them to do? We
Right.
want them to go from embedding one video on their website to embedding 5 videos on their website. So we're able to actually like track from it as like somebody clicked on this. We didn't have to gate it. It's like a customer got this, clicked on it, and now they've moved out of this list because they've basically like embedded more videos in a certain period of time. And so for us, it's like sometimes it's if it's a top of funnel thing, like I had mentioned, webinars, we really want to be getting in front of more people. So downloads, new addresses, emails, that really, really matters to us.
Yep.
On the side of like embedding, which is really, really core, I don't need as many people to know that we do embedding. What I need to do is help people who are just getting started and they say, oh, I really would get value just by putting a video on my homepage. We want to say, like, no, there are other spots. There are other areas that you could really put it in that would be super effective. Here's how you do channels. Here's how you do other things. It's like, are we adding that value for people? And so, like, whatever the asset is, the things change slightly. But for
Mhm.
guides, it's going to be the general stuff of downloads, views, and stuff like that. The last thing I would say is, like, I do look quite a decent amount at, like, what the derivatives end up driving.
Smart. Yeah.
So it's like the webinar guidebook in conjunction with doing the webinar guidebook, we updated, 20 or 30 different articles that we had written about webinars. Okay, are our keyword rankings on webinars going up from that batch of content? Okay, we also did a bunch of social posts and social ads. How did those do? Is the webinar guidebook one of the top 3 of the month or not? Like, it's like, how is that derivative content, or maybe not derivative, but sort of like ancillary content coming out? So for me, that is like definitely one of the core ways that we're looking at the performance of this content.
That is so easy to overlook, I feel like. And that, like, this is something that we see quite a bit when it comes to like a podcast, or YouTube, like YouTube series or just video series in general, is like in a lot of ways, one of those pillars can power a huge percentage of like your always on content motion in general. Newsletter, organic social, potentially thought leadership ads, like a lot of that stemming from the source material of the podcast, for example. But then when sometimes when when the podcast is measured for success, it's just measured on either attributable revenue or downloads in Apple and Spotify, like the podcast hosting players. And it's missing all of these other things where maybe one of the video clips. So, Chris, for example, CEO of Wistia, maybe from his podcast, there's a short form video clip that came from it of him. He posts on his LinkedIn and doing that, every week for months and years. And all of a sudden, LinkedIn is powering a lot, like Chris's LinkedIn is powering a lot of attention, awareness, and inbound for Wistia. And in large part, it's due to that content from the podcast, but it's not getting measured that way.
I know. I had at Zoom Info, I remember we had similar situations. Like, well, we like everybody in content has a situation when you're making certain things. Like I used to work on podcast at HubSpot, which was really fun, and we ran into the same shit, like same issues of people being like, "Oh my god, like, is this doing anything? Can we track this back?" And it's like, okay, well, there's hundreds of thousands of people looking at it or whatever, so like that should be a positive for us. But I think like on some of the things of tracking, like I found it is useful to just show things as size representations where it's like, this is the views of the podcast. And like, it's like a little, like, here's the little downloads of the podcast. And it's like, here's the views of the video that was 2 minutes. And it's like usually something like that, where it's like 10 to 12 times as much.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, great. Now let's add up all the clips we got together. Great. So this podcast may have driven 500 downloads, but it drove 25,000 impressions, on LinkedIn. So like, what are we like? How much would we pay to get those impressions? And it's like, this is very clear on these things of like how you can get to why this is valuable.
Yes. And I think, yeah, if you're looking at it, the other way, it's probably going to lead you to the wrong conclusions that maybe it's not working, quote unquote, or what have you. And so, yeah, to me, it's like the question of do any of these things work has already been answered many, many, many times by many different companies, including you all executing well on this. So it's not a question of will it work or can it work? It's like, how long will it take for you to get it to work the best way it can for you? And a lot of that is like, what is the substance of it? What is the positioning of it? What is the angle you're taking with the content? How much expertise does your team have?
For me, I also think too about it as like, or at least the one thing I do worry about is sometimes like with our content, you wonder like, am I overcommitting to something in the hope that it's going to get good? And it's like,
Oh,
or
yeah,
like
yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like banking on the mysterious part of this, but you're just holding on to something that's not doing that well. But like a lot of the times, at least what I notice is like when there's friction in that process, that's the problem. It's like if you're getting if you feel the interview is good, like you're like, ooh, that was a good interview. And then in your head, oh, that's going to be a good clip. And then you clip it and then you put it out on social and it is a good clip. Like there's very little friction in that process. But then sometimes I feel like I talk to marketers and they're like, my CEO is terrible on, and it's like,
Yeah.
it is a pain in the ass editing. I'm cutting in the weirdest
Yeah.
ways to try and make this. It's like, there's a lot of
Yes.
friction. And
Yes.
so it's
Yes.
like sometimes I feel like there is this sort of like almost intangible, like if it's actually easy, it's probably better. Like if you're starting from a point where oh, I'm going to grab this thing and it sounds great and it's going to do great, and the whole process is pretty smooth, that's a win and you're holding on to the right thing. But if you're like,
Yes.
everything is like pulling teeth, like getting the CEO to ask good questions, getting the clips to sound nice, getting the right things on social, like if every part of that is a pain, you might be spinning your wheels in the wrong direction.
Such a good point. Like the efficiency, basically, like in the process and the signals along the way that like this is going the direction. Like we can't just run a podcast in perpetuity and just assume good things are going to happen. Like we need to get signals. It doesn't have to be like day 15 of launching the podcast. We need to start seeing like inbound from it. but we need signals. We need qualitative signals. Are people like reaching out to us, DMs, comments, feedback, all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, I very much agree in efficiency through the process. Cause like if you look at a lot of the most successful content programs, a big factor of them is like how long the program has been in market. So
Hmm.
if we take that as a one marker for what can help us succeed, it's like we need a process that can allow us to do this for as long as if this can work for us, our goal should be we never stop it in a lot of ways. If it's like designed that way. And the only way to do that, to your point, is like there's efficiency in the process and it's not like a monumental lift every single time we're going to like release one of these
Yes,
episodes or, guides or what have you.
100%.
Yeah. So then maybe let's flip like to the webinar side of things. You mentioned that too. Yeah. What have you found either interesting observations, results, insights from like that program you all are doing?
So webinars are really interesting for us. One of the things about webinars is like we are a company that like we have to lean into webinars because we have webinar software. Like we want to do it, we find it as a good area to do, and we want to understand our customers how they do them. Like we know webinars are really core for people. Like I think it's around like in our state of video survey, it's like 40 or 50% of companies are hosting a webinar a month. A lot of companies are hosting like 2 to 3 webinars a month. So it's like I feel a responsibility to be like testing and trying to learn like what is going to make a webinar really good, what is going to be really effective from like a production standpoint. For us, I think the big thing that has been since I've joined that I've been really bullish on is pre-recording pieces of the webinar
Hmm.
and doing it in a way that feels really good and serves things in a really good way. So for example, like last year was the first time we have our large state of video report and then we have state of video live, like the big webinar to kind of go through the highlights of the report. With state of video live, we decided last year and continued on this tradition this year that we were going to do a 30-minute show, like pre-record 30 minutes in the style of like different kind of like news segments with like different bits and stuff like that. So like for this year's one, we had like a 60 minutes interview sketch where it was like in the style of, or it's like 60-minute style interview with AI. So somebody dressed up in like an AI costume. And then we had like a phone in segment where it was like, okay, where people calling about where to put CTAs or lead gen forms on videos and stuff like where they're struggling with. So we made this whole like 30-minute show that we then like is pre-recorded. We have people, the chat's fired up. We have like interactive elements. Everybody's standing by. The second the 30 minutes ends, it's like clicks and then it's live or taking questions live or in exactly the same seat, same setup. And so it's like we built this whole like thing, super high engagement. One of the things you can look at within Wistia is like your focused attendee rate. So like the percentage of people, like, when you are taking like an HR thing and you click out of your browser and then
Yeah.
the HR, it stops.
Yeah.
So like we have that, but for like, it doesn't stop the webinar, but it tracks when you're clicked onto the webinar browser versus when you're off kind of doing other things. So like how focused are your attendees? And it was like the pre-recorded ones killed it because we did really, really good content that we were really focused on delivering. And we were able to have people like in the chat engaging with people as the whole thing is going on. So it was like really cool. And I think that that was a big innovation for us because we were like, people are not turned off by pre-recorded content when you do it well and you put in a lot of effort. We were able to deliver, there's no fluff. Like there's fluff because we make it fun, but there's no fluff in the like stumbling over words, rough transitions. It's like every second hits in that webinar. And then the other thing for us is the first time we did State of Video Live like this, where we did pre-recorded content, some of our best performing like social posts and ads for the rest of the year were clips from State of Video. And so we were like, we made this really engaging webinar and those clips performed really, really good. And also the on-demand asset performed much better than normal. And so we were like, wow, we can really like extend the life of this stuff and get
Yes.
way, way, way more views on it by thinking through like making a really good piece of pre-recorded content for it. And that was a huge pain in the ass. 30 minutes of pre-recorded content is a ton. But like we did it on a smaller scale. Later on in the year, we had a town hall. So like, here are all the product updates for the year, right? Like, great. And so I was like, I want to use pre-recorded content on this town hall. I want something that's going to be fun and engaging. So we came up with this like game show idea called Chop It. And the idea was that it would play throughout the video, where it was like, two contestants have a webinar that they need to repurpose, and they have a set amount of time that they're going to do it in. And so I timed out both of these people to give them a task that was the time of the webinar. So it's like the webinar is 30 minutes, they kick off after 5 minutes, and you're playing clips from that video that align with the time the webinar has been going. And so it's like, oh, look, here's the two contestants, a little bit of stuff from live stuff from Wistia. So it's like live, pre-recorded for a minute, live again, pre-recorded stuff for a minute, live again. Okay, Chop It concludes. Awesome. It's like super fun. And so it was like, that was a really fun segment for a show that was mostly live.
Yep.
But having those pre-recorded bits makes it really engaging. It gets the audience's attentions back, and it gives the presenters like honestly a break for a second.
Right.
And then when we took the content, we said, okay, let's condense this down into one 5-minute video, share that on social. Boom, that also does really well. And so like
Yes.
we've been noticing a lot with like the more thoughtful we are with content in the beginning, knowing where it's going to end up, rather than saying, let's make this, then repurpose it as two totally separate motions. Like we are investing more and more effort in the beginning, and that has been paying off. And I think like to what I was saying in the beginning of this interview, like that's why I think about shelf life a lot,
Yeah.
where it's like, is it, because people were saying, is it worth it, Sam? Like, it's not taking us any time to do webinars before. And now you're asking us to make 30 minutes of content, like with like different scenes and sets and all this other stuff. Like, is this going to be worth it? And then you can show people like, okay, look, this is turning out really well. This pre-recorded idea is like really paying off really well for us. And it means that the shelf life of every single webinar is longer. So like State of Video Live, we were getting State of Video Live on demand views for a year until we
Wow.
ran the next one,
Wow.
because it's like
Right.
we embed it, on a blog post that has a lot of SEO traffic. So
Yep.
those are getting views. We share it on social. Those are getting views. It's all chunks are on YouTube. Those are getting views. It's like, so everything is like a lot longer, and that shelf life really improves.
This is really interesting. I haven't heard of that before, like that specific strategy, but it makes a lot of sense to me. For one reason too, which I think it's like it's sort of getting at what I think we're getting to this level now in content where like high effort content, like where the person consuming it can tell. Cause like putting together, like you said, a 30-minute like pre-recorded sort of like mini show essentially. I would imagine you would probably say it's fairly high effort. And so that comes across in my opinion now, because like in a lot of ways, the bar for just content creation in general has been lowered. It's far easier to create content than ever. So now what stands out is the high effort content, in my opinion. And then you married it with like the webinar, because like there's so much good information in all of these webinars. Like you mentioned, like 40-50% of companies are running them. The problem is they're not designed for the repurposing, like, in the variety of different ways. Like they're really meant for like, in the way that a lot of people are executing them, that webinar specifically. And so, yes, you can repurpose them for sure, but to like the way you've sort of married those concepts, like just probably 10x is that.
Yes, it's a really, really big change. And I think your point about understanding people seeing effort is super important. And like, even though this isn't content I really consume, I'm more out of like curiosity than anything else. But like, that's like, I think part of the reason you look at Mr. Beast and his success is like, his videos are insane to me.
It's a
They make
spectacle.
no
Yeah.
sense. But like, when you watch them, you're like, oh my God, it's like, that is crazy. Like what he built, like that is insane. And it's like, it's partially just, some of it is like just spectacle, but some of it is like he really put in a lot of effort to do this. Like, and you just feel that effort. And I think in a world where people are just prompting shit and getting videos to fly in, it's like people want to feel that you put the work in and they respond to that in a way that's not tangible. Like,
Yeah.
not tangible. They just feel it. And I
That's the
I don't know
memory.
how to put it.
I think that's where the memory gets layered into them. Like the association with your company. Wistia is now associated with high effort, high quality content. Their product must be high effort, high quality as well. Like I think those
Yes.
connections can be drawn there, especially when it's not just like the look and feel and execution of the content, but the substance itself, as well. And you all do a great job of that too.
Oh, thank you.
So if you had to recommend, like, I know we're getting a little close to time, and I want to think through like what you would recommend a content team that maybe is even smaller than your content team, and like they want to get started in some of this flywheel that you have going. What would be a way you would recommend, like if you were advising a friend who wanted to kind of get some of these things going, what steps would you recommend them to take?
I think for me, there's a couple things that I would recommend for content teams that I feel like at least for me, I feel like I've changed my perspective on in the last few years. I think that a really good content team needs a roster of freelancers and agency people. And I think when I think about Wistia, like we're not a big marketing team, we're not a big team overall, but we have a lot of freelancers that we work with that we're able to bring in at the right times. And I actually skew more towards freelancers than even necessarily agencies. Like I think a lot of agencies are really good, but I think for a lot of people getting started, it's like find an individual freelancer who fits a gap that you will regularly need to call on them for, but not so regular that you're like, I should hire this person full time.
Right.
Like maybe eventually it evolves into that. But I think a lot of the like small content teams can bat above their weight if they understand and are really honest with where the gaps are in their own team. And they know I could find a really good expert to fill that gap or help my team. So that's like one thing is like utilize freelancers and freelance talent. And like this is small, but this is like even within our state of video report, there was a stat that basically like in-house videographers and people making videos in-house is increasing over time versus using freelancers. But it's not like quite accurate because it's more like as people are making more videos, they're making more videos in-house, but they should also be using freelancers to improve those, repurpose, change, cut, do other things that are gaps. So like one, I would say definitely people should be like very keen towards like freelancers and things like that. At another level of it is like, I think is a core part of our content strategy that I feel like helps rein our content in and keeps it really focused. We don't have a keyword strategy like in the same formal way as other people.
Hmm.
What we have is core questions. And so what we have is a document that it's like 250, 300 or so questions that we feel like we should answer. And it's because it's our questions that our customers answer. Some of those things are like, what is aspect ratio? What is frame rate? Some things is like, where do I put a video on my website? Some is like, what is the difference between hosting providers, right? So like things that are all those core questions. So I think no matter what you're making in terms of content, make sure that you have like the staff who is able to like do it, the freelancers who are able to help support like up leveling things beyond what your normal team could do. And then also just making sure that you have like a really good, like clear understanding of like what question is this thing answering. And I think so many people focus on the topic or the keyword or the title, which are all really good things, but it's like it's hard to check yourself and read an entire 50-page book and go, do people feel better about webinars now? Do they know how to run a webinar start to finish? Do they know every single analytics term? And ask yourself, like, did I answer all of the questions that this is trying to get across? Or am I answering questions that are out of scope of this? And so for us, it's like, I think those are the things that are super clear is like, you want to make sure that those do really well, really well. The last thing that I think I'll like kind of point out of like what I think Wistia does well and what I think other people can learn from, it's answering the question, first and then thinking about the container around that question. And for us, we are using well known tropes or containers. Like we ran an ad, the complete control ad, which we made all with AI. Like that ad was like a Mentos commercial, like an 80s Mentos. It's like it feels that way, it looks that way. And so it pops and gets in people's heads that way. The guidebook is like a travel book. Like that is what we are stealing this from. Wistia Live, the container around it or the format around it is a news show. And so, like, I think what you always want to start with is all of these little pieces, but then put it in a container where you're going, like, just the thing answering these questions. Can we make this fun? Can we make this interesting? Can we put a wrapper around it? Like, chop it as a game show. This thing is that. It's like, can you make something that's going to really make it kind of like pop and seem like different, but in a way that's not scary to people? Because people want to see something that's somewhat familiar but slightly off, like, and I think that's why it's like fun to be in B2B kind of a certain way, because you could just borrow lots of things from other areas, tweak them for B2B, and it seems very funny and interesting.
Yes. Oh, I love all of these. Yeah, big fan of that. Like basically mixing and matching like concepts, which there's hundreds and thousands that you can just source from other, could be like just TV shows, movies, direct to consumer stuff, like consumer world, and to your point, applying that in B2B. And a lot of folks in B2B haven't done that.
No.
So it's still honestly, as crazy as it is to say, like pretty wide open for tons of concepts.
Yeah, there's tons of things that people can do. They should just stop looking at their competitors too much.
Exactly. Exactly.
Go to an art museum. You know what I mean? Like, you want to
Yeah.
go to something
Yeah.
like go to an art museum. Like, you're probably more likely, like basically like a lot of the Wizard Guidebook is like there's a lot of art inspiration from there that has nothing to do with anything B2B. And it's not like I'm going to be getting that from like Vimeo. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like I'm not going to steal those things. Like, the best, the coolest things come from outside places where they're culturally interesting? So it's like, I think that's a huge part of it. Like, people need to stop watching their competitors' content as much.
And on that note, last question, like the future of content in B2B, like what is interesting to you, exciting to you, a trend you're seeing? Could be video related, could be any of the other content, you know, methods and strategies we talked about related. But yeah, anything you're paying attention to or excited about.
There's a lot of things I'm excited about within our space. I'll talk about what I'm excited for just like marketers and then like
Mhm.
content. And I'm not really a sports person. So I'm going to butcher this analogy, but I do like the Celtics quite a lot. And I like Brad Stevens, the former coach. And like, I think one of the things that was super interesting is he had this insight that basically like basketball players have gotten so good that traditional roles don't really work for them anymore. You can have a dude who's like 7 whatever feet tall who can also shoot threes now. Like you can have guys who are like very short and I mean only like 6 something and can like defend or get rebounds.
Yeah.
So in this new world, like what you end up having is like you want people on your team who have a mix of skills who overlap. Everybody should be able to do or understand a little bit of everything on the basketball court, right? Like you can't just have somebody who doesn't shoot, who doesn't defend, like everybody needs to do everything. It requires that people are very smart and have a lot of like understanding of the game, where to put the ball, who to pass it to in different situations, and can see opportunities. And I think when I'm looking at a lot of the stuff around the capabilities that AI is giving marketers, I think the capabilities that like you could start designing, prototyping, and building stuff, like we are going to move further and further away from this idea of like a dedicated person who just does this one thing. And I think what you're going to see is like what makes this really fun is like the way I really believe in strong amounts of collaboration between design and content when making PDFs. Like you're gonna see more and more teams function like this, where it's like the teams themselves, the in-house teams are all smart players with different skill sets who overlap and know what to pass to each other. And those teams are going to be augmented by freelancers and agencies that they bring in for the most specialized stuff. And so it's like for us, like we have a great video team. We have one of our freelancers that we work with, Billy. He's incredible at like AI, like video. And so it's like, man, when we need to do stuff with AI, like Billy is the shit. Like he's awesome. And
Yep.
so it's like we know where to play in our own area. We know how to pass stuff off really effectively between each other. And then we know how to bring in outside people. And I think like from a really just like day-to-day life perspective, that is more fun.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it is like fundamentally more fun than being like, oh shit, I gotta pass the copy over to design. And then I'm
Yeah.
gonna wait 2 weeks and I'm not gonna be happy with what came back. Like that is
Yeah.
not a good experience compared to like a collaborative, fun, going back and forth, chopping it up with each other, like having like good discussion over stuff. So that's one thing. Like I'm excited for the marketer of the future, the marketer who's like a generalist, the marketer who knows how to collaborate really well. And like that feels like a really good return for marketing. Like that feels
Yeah.
like a good vibe that's going to be cool for people. The other thing from like a content perspective that I think about is like I am as much it is not easy being somebody for who's from like started in blogging. I was in a lot of stuff at podcasting for HubSpot, did a lot of stuff in like YouTube and social videos for Zoom Info. Like I'm getting closer and closer to video first content, starting with video and moving
Yeah.
from into the other assets that come out of it. I think more and more marketers are going to end up in a world where they are thinking video first. And it's a really big shift because I think a lot of the times you think about it as write a bunch of blog post move to ebook, it takes a month and a half to write. A month and a half after that, video comes out. Video has more views than all of those combined, like,
Yeah.
but it took you 7 months to get to that video.
Right.
It's like, but I'm noticing when we've started certain things like video first, like, hey, we're going to host a webinar that's an AMA about our AI ad campaign. We're going to start with the webinar. It is a way quicker time period to
Mm.
those assets.
Right.
It's like now
Yeah.
the best asset is the starting point, and every one of those assets gets the video on down with it. Like, it's like, oh, we ran this AMA. Great. Now we're going to clip the AMA. We're going to use it as a blog post. We're going to insert those clips. Okay, great. Now those clips are going into social and fueling it. I think the more marketers start adjusting to video first and thinking video as the starting point, the better off or the more interesting stuff we're going to start getting as well. Because it is fundamentally thinking about like YouTube, thinking about it from that perspective, rather than trying to think about like, oh, how do I convert this ebook into a script? You're thinking like, I have this amazing script. What other information can I add in here? And so like video first is definitely the area where I think is the future for marketing. It's an area that people will say, oh, we're here right now, blah, blah, blah. Everything's video first. Marketing teams just don't operate like that today. It's not a natural thing, especially for really big marketing teams. It's going to be like a challenge, but it's one of those areas where HubSpot championed this, Wistia really champions this as well. Like to give a small marketing team that's creative and interesting an edge where they can compete against a much larger, better resourced, but slower organization.
Yes.
I think the companies that are going to do that are going to be the ones that start with video and the ones that put a lot of effort into it. That is like a future that I could definitely get behind and I'm very like excited about. So those are like probably the big ones. Other things, it's like I am watching very carefully everything with AI. I am thinking about how we show up in AI search results, but I think like I am more concerned with like the macro trends of like what is the marketer of the future going to look like?
Yeah.
Who is the person that I want to hire? Who is the person
Yes.
that is going to be the best in seat? And how do I build a team that is going to work really well for those types of players? That's the kind of thing that I think about and I'm like very excited about.
Incredible final answers there. I completely agree. Obviously, our entire company with Hatch is predicated around video first as well. It's a mega trend. Every platform, everything online. It's just like that's just where the world is going. So we also have to follow consumer behavior. Like people want to consume video. And so yes, with that, you then get all the offshoots from it. And, but it's like starting there versus like ending there.
Yes, yes, and it's not easy to do, it's something that people need help with, they need understanding of how to do it, and they need to help, like, shift their orgs there, but, like, the results are there. Like, if you build that process, the results will be there, like, almost guaranteed.
Awesome. Well, if anybody wants to go learn more about that or any of the strategies we talked about today, go to Wistia's website. They've got a great like resources learning central location where you can get access to all of that. And then Sam, I'd imagine if anybody wants to connect with you, LinkedIn.
LinkedIn's the best place, just connect with me there, I'm just Sam Balter.
Awesome. Well, this was great, Sam. I really appreciate it. And yeah, catch everybody next one.
Awesome, thanks so much for having me.